Okay, so now I'll be reading Chapter 2. Like I said, every chapter will be read today. Chapter 2 is entitled Everything is Fine, or Is It? Hold on. I just got a bad gateway. Okay, never mind. Sorry. Whatever that was, let's just go. Ow. Day 2, morning. My ears hurt. Twilight had managed to get back to bed later that night. She decided to put the experiment on hold for now and do more research on both her experiment and that dream. She was back in bed when Spike had woken up. He thought it was odd that Twilight was still in bed. She was normally up before he was. He watched her for a moment before going over to fix her blanket, which had been tossed haphazardly over her before he headed downstairs. When Spike got downstairs, he saw the mess Twilight had left the night before. Books scattered all over the floor, along with an empty mug on her desk. He was used to Twilight being up late and leaving a mess, but he hadn't seen her leave a mess this big before. He started to put away the books as he grumbled out, "What has gotten into her?" He checked one of the books and tilted his head. It was on a dream analysis. Twilight woke up later that morning and got out of bed. She noticed Spike wasn't in bed and blinked. "Spike was never up early," she thought to herself. She looked up out the window and saw how late it was. "Ah! It's already mid-morning! Spike, why didn't you wake me up?" she yelled as she ran down the stairs. "Spike!" She started to get panicked when she didn't see him in the main hall of the library, and the dream from last night flooded back to her. "I'm right here, Twilight," he called back as he stuck his head out of the kitchen. He blinked when he saw her as she shuffled from hoof to hoof, looking around in a panic, her mane sticking out and her eyes wide. "Are you okay?" He looked freaked out. She looked over and calmed down when she saw him there with a confused look on his face. "I'm fine, Spike," she answered him. She headed over and went into the kitchen. She used her magic to take down a mug and filled it with tea. "Just not used to sleeping in late," she went on to explain, also it was half true. She was an early bird, and she didn't like it when she slept late. It threw her off her schedule. She really didn't want to talk about a dream either, so she left it at that. "All right, Twilight." He didn't buy the explanation. She had been way too freaked out for just having overslept. There was also the books on dream analysis she had left out, but he didn't want to press the issue. He put Twilight's breakfast on the table for her. Grain toast like she normally had in the morning. "What are we going to be doing today? Working the experiment again?" "No, Spike. I decided to put that on hold for now," Twilight answered before she took a bite of her toast. "I need to do more research on that before trying again." She was still worried about what had happened in her dream. She didn't want to risk something like that actually happening. "Well, all right, Twilight," he said with a look of concern. He had never known Twilight to give in so easily, and they had studied the research for that kind of spell and experiment backwards and forward for nearly 2 months. He left Twilight in the kitchen to go to finish his chores for the day. He wanted to finish with the library's main hall before Pony started to show up. After that, he would clean the bedrooms before going back to the kitchen and clean up the breakfast dishes. Twilight sat at the table thinking about her dream again before she shook her head trying to dismiss it. "It was just a dream. Let it go, Twilight. Spike is fine." She reassured herself and finished her toast and tea. She used her magic to put the dirty dishes away in the sink before she headed out into the main hall of the library. She started to look over the book titles and tried to find the one she wanted. Once she found it, she sent it over her desk before she looked for the next book. Day 2. Afternoon. As the afternoon rolled around, Twilight put on her saddlebags. "Spike, I'm headed into town. Take care of the library," she called out to Spike, who called back that he would. She smiled and used her magic to open the door and went outside. Her magic shut the door behind her as she stood outside for a moment to take in the afternoon sun and fresh air. Twilight made her way down the street to her first stop, Quills and Sofas, to get some quills before she made her way to Sugar Cube Corner. The dream still weighed on her mind as much as she tried to dismiss it. She decided to get Spike a treat. Plus, she was a bit hungry. She went inside and up to the counter. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Cake." I can't do Mrs. Cake's voice. "Hello, Twilight. What can I do for you?" "Oh my God! Oh God, that sucks!" Mrs. Cake asked as she smiled at Twilight with her normal friendly smile. She stood behind the counter of the baked sweet store. "Pinkie Pie is out at the moment, if you're looking for her. I can let her know when she gets back," she added with another smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Cake. I'm not looking for Pinkie at the moment. I'd like a blueberry muffin, and—" she said as she looked at the different sweets on display as she tried to decide on something for Spike. "One of those crushed emerald cupcakes," she said with a smile at Mrs. Cake. Mrs. Cake smiled and took out a bag for the order. She used a set of tongs in her muzzle to pick up the cupcake first and place it in the bag carefully before putting a sheet of wax paper over. After she did that, she got the muffin out and put it in the bag, careful not to mush the frosting on the cupcake. There you go, dearie, Mrs. Cake said as she put the bag on the counter for Twilight. Thank you, Mrs. Cake, Twilight said as she puts the money on the counter and used her magic to put the bag of treats in her saddle bag before she left Sugar Cube Corner. She made her way to the park bench. She took a seat and floated the bag out and took out her muffin and nibbled on it. She sat quietly as she nibbled her muffin and tried to figure out what happened to wish she had twiffed the experiment when she saw the Cutie Mark Crusaders go by. Apple Bloom and Sweetie Belle in a wagon, as Scootaloo pulled them with her scooter. She smiled and wondered what adventures they were up to try and get their cutie mark today. She finished the muffin as she let her mind wander a little on the three fillies in their quest to get a cutie mark. After she finished her muffin, she got up and started to make her way back to the library at a slow trot to enjoy the feel of the sun on her. She looked over at Sugar Cube Corner as she moved by and thought about going in to see if Pinky was back yet. The happy Pink Pony was good at raising people's spirits. She changed her mind as she went by, though, and thought to herself, "It was just a bad dream. Nothing more than that. Spike, I'm home. I'm home. I got you something," she called out as she came into the library and looked around, removing her saddlebags. She returned them to where she always kept them. She used her magic to open one of the pouches and took out the bag from Sugar Cube Corner. Spike came downstairs from the bedroom with a smile. "Really, Twilight? You got me something?" he asked as he went over to Twilight and looked up at her. Twilight smiled back at him and nods as she floated the bag over to him so he could take it. He opens the bag and looks inside. "Oh, wow! Thank you so much, Twilight," he said as he took out the cupcake and looked at the sparkling emerald mixed in with the frosting. He licked his lips and took a bite out of the cupcake. This is so good," he said with a content smile on his face. She smiled at the Spike while enjoying the cupcake. "You're welcome, Spike," she said as she moved her desk and floated the quills over and put them away. She was just about to get started on some research when she heard a knock at the door. "Who could that be?" she said to herself while she moved to her hooves and went to the door as Spike answered it. "Oh, hello, Spike. Is Twilight here?" came a soft voice. Twilight recognized it as her friend Fluttershy. "Hi, Fluttershy. Come on in," Spike said with a smile and moved so Fluttershy could come inside. "Twilight's here," he said as he looked over at Twilight. "Hi, Fluttershy. What brings you into town today?" Twilight asked with a friendly smile. Fluttershy hardly ever left her cottage or her animals unless it was important. "Do you need help with something, or a book?" "Hello, Twilight. Well, Apple Bloom and Scootaloo and Sweetie Belle are having another sleepover in my place. I was wondering, if it's not too much trouble, if I could borrow a book to help keep them entertained?" Fluttershy asked in her soft, timid voice. She normally used it when she didn't want to bother anyone. Twilight just smiled and nodded at Fluttershy. "Sure, Fluttershy. I think I have the perfect thing," Twilight answered as she went over to a shelf and started to look over the books before she took one down and checked the title to be sure it was the right one. "Here we are. Slumber 101. Oh my god. All you ever wanted to know about slumber parties but were afraid to ask," she said as she looked over at Fluttershy. "Is Rarity too busy to host a sleepover again?" she asked as she brought the book over. "Yes, she is. She got a big order from Canterlot at the last minute," Fluttershy answered as she put the book in her saddlebag. "I wasn't sure at first if I should do the sleepover again after what happened last time. But they are good kids. I just hope things go smoother this time." "I'm sure they will, Fluttershy. That book should have plenty of suggestions to help keep them from getting bored. I just hope it goes better than my sleepover for Applejack and Rarity." Twilight said with a smile. "Do you want to stay for tea?" she asked Fluttershy, but she simply shook her head no. "I really should go and get everything ready before they show up," Fluttershy said with a smile. "But thank you for the offer. And the book. I'll be sure to bring it back when I'm done and let you know how things went," she added as she and Twilight walked to the door, and Twilight used her magic to open the door for her. "You're welcome, Fluttershy. Have fun with the fillies," Twilight said as Fluttershy headed out the door with a smile, then started to walk back to her cottage near the Everfree Forest. Twilight watched Fluttershy for a few moments before she closed the door. "I sure hope they don't cause Fluttershy too much trouble," Twilight said to herself with a sigh before she went back to her desk. Day 2. Night. Twilight spent the rest of the afternoon and most of that evening in deep study and thought. The library was normally pretty quiet, and only the occasional pony came for a book, and Spike was able to handle that most of the time. But of course, if she was needed, she stopped to answer questions or give advice, but that was pretty rare in a small town like Ponyville. When Spike asked what she wanted for dinner, she said she wasn't hungry, but Spike, being the ever-faithful assistant, made sure she took a break to eat. "Come on, Twilight, you have to eat something," he said, arms crossed as he looked up at her. Twilight sighed and nodded at Spike. "All right, Spike, if you insist. I'll have a daffodil and daisy. Oh, I got them mixed up. A dandelion and daisy sandwich. Hay fries and my usual tea. Twilight answered him as she moved away from her desk and followed him to the kitchen to have dinner. Spike was her assistant, so sometimes he knew what was best for her, even if she didn't always like to admit it. Dinner went by quietly, and she left Spike to finish the dishes as she went back to her desk to study. Soon found, though, she started to doze off at her desk and shakes her head. She looked around and blinked a few times before looking out the window. Oh my, it got dark fast, she mused to herself as she got up and turned off the lights. Spike had already went to bed. She hadn't even noticed. She made her way up the stairs into her bed with a yawn. She climbed under the covers and closed her eyes. She was asleep pretty quick. The sleepless night before had caught up with her. Oh no, more italicized! She took Spike to the hospital. The doctors did their best to save him, but a piece of crystal had embedded itself deep in his chest and couldn't be removed. When they tried the crystal, reacted with the magic. Spike died soon after she got him to the hospital. The royal guard arrived before he died. The explosion and fire had altered them. She had already been on edge, and when she found out he died, she panicked. She fired a magic blast at the guard and started to run, the logical part of her brain shutting down. The guard quickly gave chase to try and stop her. She did her best to keep from away from the guard, but she was emotionally drained because of Spike's death, magically drained from the experiment. She galloped as hard as she could, though, moving through the streets of Ponyville. No, this can't be happening. It was an accident, Twilight said frantically as she ran down the streets of Ponyville. On the trail was a royal guard. A couple of unicorns on the ground ran after her. Their horns flared with magic. A couple of Pegasi flew over her head. She gasped as bolts of magic went around her, and she dodged to avoid them. The Pegasi overhead dive-bombed at her, causing her to look around for cover. Why is this happening? She yelled as she darted into an alley to try and lose the guard that chased after her and recover some of her magic. But it wouldn't last for long. The Pegasi would have trouble, but the unicorn could easily follow her. She saw the guards start to search the alley and started to run again while she focused on her magic. She teleported herself back to the library and her eyes went wide. She was greeted with the horrible sight of the library's current state. There was a big hole in the floor from the blast. The old tree groaned a bit from a gentle breeze outside. Her books were scattered around. A few burned. Tears rolled down her cheek. She hadn't been back since the accident. She backed up and turned, opening the door, and came face to face with one of the unicorn royal guards. She stared at the guard as his horn started to glow. Surrender yourself, Twilight sparkled, the guard demanded. His horn glowed bright and ready to fire a spell if she resisted or used her magic. With the logical side of her mind out, in a state of panic, she didn't listen. Her horn started to glow to use a spell, only to feel the impact of the guard's magic hit her and knock her to the ground. She woke up with a loud gasp and sat bolt upright in her bed, bathed in cold sweat. She shook in fear, her eyes wide, and darted around to make sure she was still in her room. She breathed in quick breaths. If everything is fine, she said softly to herself. Everything is fine, she repeated as she tried to reassure herself and calm down. She pulled the covers over her head and hid herself like a fool from a monster in the bedroom with a soft whimper. A small part of her logical mind knew it was just a dream, but at the moment that didn't help. She shivered under her covers quickly. That was chapter 2. Well, I think so far I think it's good. I mean, there are a couple of grammar mistakes, but nobody's perfect, so I don't care about that. I just wanted something to read, and well, this is it. It's much better than The Generation Even Time Has Forgotten, and it's definitely much better than It Was Bound to Happen. Those two stories suck! And you know what's even worse? I have to finish reading them both! God, man. But this is good. So yeah, chapter 3 is coming up, so stay tuned.